Good morning, everybody. This is the live market open for Thursday, November 12th. I'm Yohay, Elam, Forex Quench and Market Movers podcast, and this is the show for FX3. Good morning, Jack Sir Wild. Good morning, everybody else here in the chat or watching the video. As always, we'll cover recent developments, charts and levels, what's in the next 24 hours, which are certainly busier, and of course, your questions. If you don't see the chat box below, please go to tlk.io/fx3-forex-live-video. Okay, so what did we have since yesterday? We had a miss on UK wages, but they're still okay. They still rose 3% year over year. They just were expected to rise a bit stronger. Okay, unemployment rate was a positive surprise because we had a rise of drop to 5.3%. Jobless claims disappointed just a bit in the UK, but all in all was an okay report. So expectations were a bit too high maybe, but things were okay. Good morning, Rob. Good morning, Fabian. And then we had Mario Draghi speaking, president of the ECB. He said nothing, but today might be different. He has an official testimony. He might say quite a lot. And then during the night, we had also Australian jobs coming out better than expected, much better than expected. Let's look at the data first of all, and then show you the charts. So here we have it, the Australian employment change, a huge leap of 58.6 thousand jobs, much higher than 15K expected. Even the last figure for September was revised to the upside from a drop of 5K, only 0.8, only 800 people lost jobs in September. All in all, if you compare this rise this month, last month, of October, 58.6 thousand, it's like the US would gain 800,000 jobs, NFP 800,000, okay? So that's a huge leap. Unemployment rate fell to 5.9% from 6.2, also big fall, good news. And this comes despite a rise in the participation rate from 64.9 to 65%. So if we compare the participation rate in Australia to the US, at 65 against 62.4, all in all, great news. Now, when we have great news, market buys it, okay? This time, let's look at the chart. Clear to see quite a leap here. Quite a leap from around 70.60 all the way to 71.54. Now we're stabilizing at 71.40, but the pair is certainly higher, stronger on higher ground, and not ready to move lower. Now, next levels to watch on the top side are 72 and 72.80. Okay. On the downside, 71.10 turns into support, and 70.60, and of course 70. Now, good morning, everybody. This comes despite some doubts, okay? So we had a few analysts saying this is just too much. It's too good to be true. Changes in methodology in the Australian Statistics Agency. So not everybody's buying. Some people say it's just too good to be true in Australia, this jump in jobs. But it's even if it's a bit exaggerated, it's probably good enough to keep the RBA from cutting the rates in the next decision. And this is, of course, good news for the Australian dollar. So we had the Australian dollar pressured by lots of bad Chinese news, and now everything looks much better. Okay, so that was the big event that we had so far. Euro dollar, well, this is what I call range trading, consolidating in range, going a bit up, a bit down. Just before the show, we're seeing it in the past few hours slide back down. But all in all, we have here 107.10 more or less is support, and resistance at 107.90. Narrower range than we've seen a few days ago. We saw a drop towards that support line at 106.60, but from there it returned to the previous range, waiting for more developments. So yesterday, Draghi didn't say anything, but a few of his colleagues did say a few things. So a few members of the ECB did actually say that there's no rush to act in December. One of the members is Benoit Coureur. I think he's French. Anyway, he said that there's no rush, no decision has been made yet. And a few more hawkish members, they also said that there's no need to act. Okay, so you would expect in this case the euro to rise, okay? But on the other hand, we have the Fed. Okay, so what we heard yesterday from the Fed is more hawkish as well. We heard John Williams, the San Francisco Fed, usually sort of in the middle, perhaps even a bit dovish, saying that there's a very strong case to hike in December. So the Fed is moving closer to hike. It's consolidating on hike. Perhaps this allows the ECB to let go, to perhaps use less tools than they thought of using, and they could keep these tools for further along the road. All in all, euro-dollar is balanced, but we have also big events today. So the Fed is leaning towards rate hikes. The ECB is not so sure it's going to act. So both banks are sort of going more hawkish. For the time being, euro-dollar is stable on this news, but today we have big events to rock the boat. Okay, so let's see what we have today on the agenda. Quite a busy agenda. First of all, we have Draghi once again. During the show, actually in 25 minutes, he's scheduled to begin speaking. Now, it doesn't mean he'll speak on time because it's testimony in front of the European Parliament. And I think I might have the link for that. So let me try to fetch that and see if perhaps you want to watch it. It'll probably begin after the show. Usually these things in the European Parliament take more time than they begin later than expected. Okay, so why can't I find it now? Okay, I'll search for it and put it on the chat soon. Jobless claims in the United States is every Thursday at 1:30. Let's see what we're expecting according to the FX rate calendar here on Forex Crunch. So initial jobless claims expected to slide just a bit, remain in the good range from 276 to 270, more or less where we've seen it recently. All in all, you can see the trend in the past few years, including in the past few months. It's falling, less jobless claims, more jobs, good news. Also continuing claims, well, why don't we have data here? Anyway, expected to remain more of the same. For those of you trading the Canadian dollar, we have the new housing price index, NHPI, if you wish. Let's take a look at the Canadian dollar if we're talking about that. I don't think this figure will have such a big impact, but let's take a look. So currently still in range. We had this big leap here on the non-farm payrolls, okay? And then we've seen dollar CAD sort of grinding a bit lower. We've seen it tick down. All in all, it's waiting for developments in oil prices and, of course, developments in the United States, which we have later today. So I still see support at 132.40 despite the slide, and 132.80 is very minor resistance. The really important levels are at 134.60 on the top side, and on the downside, let's update it here. I think this is a better line. 130.50 before the round number of 130 is significant support for the loonie. Okay, let's talk about other events for today. We began talking about events. The big event for the day is Janet Yellen. She's going to speak probably about monetary policy, not about regulation or banking or anything that may be important but doesn't move markets, not like Draghi yesterday. So Janet Yellen speaks at 2:30 GMT. This is expected to be on time because the Fed will probably release her statement when she begins speaking, so you don't have to listen to the whole speech. Sorry. And let's see if she also repeats what her colleagues said about a strong case for rate hike in December. Let's take a look at this favorite. Still more or less the same. Let's refresh it. See if we haven't had any change. This is the implied probability for rate hike in December. Currently 67% for rate hike. That means 2/3. I'll put that on the screen for you on the chat. Countdown to the Fed now on your screens. Let's make and that hasn't changed much in recent days. I believe that it might change if we hear something from Janet Yellen. Okay, that's what we're. That's the big event for the day. But she's not the only one to speak. We have at 3:15 we have Charlie Evans of the Chicago Fed he's been a dove, but he said in recent days also he became he began accepting the rate hike. Okay, so that was also another hawkish sign, and the markets didn't react to that. Didn't react to a dove crying, to a dove saying that he accepts a rate hike. Okay, so I think that isn't priced in. So we have Yellen at 2:30, Evans at 3:15, Bill Dudley of the New York Fed, number 3 at the Fed. He speaks at 5:15. He's been bang in the middle. Okay. And much later we have Stanley Fischer, number 2 at the Fed, the vice chair. He's sort of been center hawkish. He'll be speaking at 11 GMT. So we have 4 Fed speakers today. The most important one being Yellen, then Evans, the dove, Dudley, the centrist, and Fischer, the hawk. Okay, or center hawk if you wish. But I skipped on a few events here. So we have another jobs figure today, not only jobless claims like we have every Thursday, we have the monthly release of JOLTS. What's the acronym? Let me try to see it here. Job openings, no, we don't have it here. Turnover survey. Anyway, this is a figure for September, so it's older than the last non-farm payrolls, and it's released afterwards. It's lagging, so why is it important? It's important because the Fed says it's important, okay? So Bernanke and also Yellen talked about this as a wider measure of the jobs market. Now, in August, it disappointed, it fell. Okay, so it reached this multi-decade high here in the release in September. That was for July? No, I think it was for August. Anyway, and in the release in October, we had it, the release in September for August. Oh no, I'm confusing myself. The release in September for July was extremely good, the best in over a decade, and then the release in October for August was disappointing in comparison. Okay, because it fell to lower levels, but still on high ground. So now we have the release for September. September, according to the non-farm payrolls, was a bad month. So expectations are relatively low. No change, 5.37 million. Together with the JOLTS, one of the components, one of the smaller figures there is the number of quits. Why are quits important? Because when would you quit your day job? You would quit your day job when you have a better job, either better conditions or better pay. Okay, so if you have a better pay, then if people quit their job and get a new job, first of all, it's a sign of confidence. When things are going bad, people stay at the same job and don't move. They just cling to their chairs like politicians. But when you have a good job market, people quit their jobs to get a better job. And if they do so, if they get better pay, they have more money to spend, okay? So the level of quits has been high but stable in recent months, 2.7 million. Let's see if it moves to 2.8 million or falls to 2.6. So this is a figure the Fed looks at. Today, the release is accompanied by Janet Yellen and other speeches more or less in the same time, so maybe it will not have the same effect, but it's important to watch because Janet Yellen watches it. Okay, she probably has the data when she'll begin speaking. They always have the data before us. Okay, so that's another big event, and I mentioned earlier the Canadian dollar. So we have crude oil inventories at 4 GMT. It was delayed from yesterday. Yesterday was Armistice Day. Remembrance Day, Veterans Day, and each country has a different name, but basically it's 97 years since World War I ended yesterday, 97 years from yesterday, and markets in the United States and in Canada were on holiday. So this release, which is usually on Wednesday, was delayed to today. Okay, so today is a busy day. Let's see how the Canadian dollar reacts to all this. According to the initial figure from API, from the American Petroleum Institute, inventories rose. Now we'll hear from the EIA, Energy. I always forget those names. Anyway, EIA, yeah. Energy Information Association. Okay, so we're expecting another rise. Last time we had almost 3 million barrels. Now we're expecting a rise of less than 1 million. In general, the trend is higher, so it's bad for oil prices, and it's bad for the Canadian dollar. Let's just take a small peek at oil prices before moving on to other currencies, and we're expecting your questions. So Price of oil has been falling. It's creating now a double bottom here at 42.50. Still a bit above this level. We had it plunge to almost 42.50 yesterday. You can see it was the same level seen in October. Very nice double bottom here. Let's see if it's a bounce or break from this point. My tendency is to see it falling because we'll have another rise in inventories, and the OPEC meetings are coming and they're not expected to cut production, and there's just too much oil floating around. So I believe we could have oil prices fall, maybe not all the way to 38 or below, but perhaps this is an important psychological line, number 40 right here. Let's see if we move towards this level. Let's see what happens. It's critical for the Canadian dollar. So last time we've seen such levels, the CAD was weaker. Anyway, so that was the Canadian dollar. Let's talk about other currencies. Pound. Pound dollar. Now it's falling 151.85, but yesterday's poor jobs report, or not poor, not good as expected. The wages remained at 3%, so that hurt the pound only temporarily. But then it reached a new high of 152.50, which is now resistance. Now it's falling below 152 for no particular pound-related reason. 151.60 is weak support, then 151.10, and of course 150 on the downside. Resistance, strong resistance, 153 to 153.70. The pre-NFP levels for the pound. Dollar yen still at post-NFP highs, just under 123, a bit grinding lower. You can see this trend. So the high is 123.60, and now we've seen low. Let's move it here. 122.70. So I still see it as range trading, as waiting for the next event. If we have a dovish Yellen, of course, it could continue falling at bad numbers from the US. But if we have more talk of a rate hike, which is certainly possible from Yellen, we could see the pair rising towards resistance at 123.60. Talked about dollar CAD, Aussie dollar, once again 71.10 to 72. We talked about that. Kiwi, the Kiwi didn't have bad news from the RBNZ this week, so it managed to bounce off the lows. The lows at 65, the round number. 66.15 is important resistance. Okay, so these are sort of the major pairs, and brief of what happened and what will happen, what's expected. I'm waiting for your questions. Let me try to find that link for the ECB's testimony. I think I know how to find it. Draghi will begin speaking at the bottom of the hour. Okay. Okay, the discussion began.
Have seen how important it is to get.
I won't watch it now as we speak, but if you want, I'll put it here on the screen. The video, you have to click play to play it anyway. This is the link to Draghi's speech. Draghi's testimony is just a link to the European Parliament. Okay, as we know, the European Parliament is a nice building, but they don't have a real authority. So usually does say something meaningful, but doesn't reveal too much. He keeps the big news to his own interviews, events, press statements, and so forth and so forth. Okay, so let's take another look here at euro dollar, how it's doing before Draghi begins talking. So it's at 107.40, and it's currently, so the levels to watch here are 107.80 more or less, more narrow range, and 107.10. Further support at 106.60, and resistance at 108.10, 109. Okay, so these are the levels I'm watching. Any questions? Anybody? Meanwhile, I'll talk about other currency pairs. I'm looking to see if we have some. I see that Draghi is not speaking yet. Of course, he's expected to begin speaking only at 8 GMT, and it might be, of course, later, because other politicians there have to talk as well. Let's look at dollar Swiss. Dollar Swiss currently in the middle of the range, as I see it, the higher range, the post-NFP range, between parity, just one, and 1085, 10085. That's the levels. These are the levels I'm watching. It's important to remember we have intervention by the S&B. They say it out loud. Euro Swiss just under 108, supported 107.60, and resistance. Well, we can put resistance right here at 108.10 more or less. Anyway, this pair suffers heavy intervention by the S&B. Okay, before we move to other currencies, we have questions from JM. He asks, where can we watch the Fed speeches from Yellen? I don't have at the moment a link. When we have Yellen speaking in front of Congress, we do always have a link to that. That's always broadcast live. But I don't have a link for that. Let me try to find something for you. Today she's speaking in a private event. She's speaking in a conference. Well, not necessarily. Conference on monetary policy implementation in the post-crisis period. She'll be speaking in Washington. No, I don't have a link for that today. Another question from Paul. Bullish on New Zealand dollar against the Japanese yen, buy 80.40, stop loss 80.10, take profit target 83.90. Your thoughts? Let's take a look at that. First of all, let's talk about fundamentals for the Kiwi against the yen. Kiwi against the yen was one of the most popular currency pairs before the financial crisis, and that's because it was the perfect carry trade. Okay, so people lent money in Japanese yen and then bought currencies with high interest rates. And the New Zealand dollar, at one point, the interest rate in New Zealand was 8.75, something that it's hard to imagine today in 2015. So anyway, so you went long on the Kiwi against the yen. Okay, so that's a risk on move. You believe that things will get better, stock markets will rise, and we'll see in general situation going higher. So let's look. Support, currently we're at 80.50. You bought, well, more or less in these levels. Support is stop loss at 80.10. It seems a bit tight because according to the lines I've drawn, we have here support at 79.10, 79.90. So maybe if you want to sort of defend yourself a bit more, maybe a bit lower than this level, take a few pips below this low here seen in early November, because the line you've put is 80.10 is right here, below this low. This is just a swing low here, okay, and was seen yesterday. Now you said that target 83.90. 83.90, where's that? Okay, you have a very good risk reward ratio, that's for sure. Just 30 pips to the downside, and wow, 350 pips to the upside. So yeah, it's quite a huge risk reward ratio. I think the stop loss is a bit tight. I would put it below this line right here, below the 79.90 line, maybe 79.60 or something like that. Of course, this is not trading advice, just my thoughts. And the highs, well, look, it hasn't seen. Let's widen out this chart. 83.90. Let's try to put that. I don't know how you reached 83.90. Well, not according to support and resistance anyway. I see the top of this range either here at 82.67, 82.70, or or here at 83.30. So I would say 83.90 is a far goal, and that 80.10 is a very tight stop. So the risk reward ratio is huge. If you manage to pull it out, of course, it's an excellent trade. If all your trades are like this, then you need basically more or less one successful trade or two for every 10 you lose, so it's great. But because of the tight stop loss and far target, there's some risk over there. So these are my opinions on that. Another question from Jeanette. Will currency pairs with AUD correct today? I don't know. We had such a great jobs report from Australia. Really great. So even if you have doubts, I don't see it falling quite soon. So even if all the analysts say that it's too good to be true, the Australian Statistics Agency has a problem with doing its math, whatever. Okay, so I don't think it's going to be that bad. I'm not sure it's going to correct today. Okay, we'll look at the events. We don't have any major events from Australia today, and maybe the AUD could correct against the US dollar because maybe we'll have something really hawkish from Yellen. So maybe AUD against the US dollar could correct, but that's because of the US dollar. If you look at other Australian dollar currency pairs, I don't see such big corrections. I see the Australian dollar received really good news, and despite all the doubts, it's not going to fade away in the next 24 hours. Okay, more questions? We have, during the night, I didn't find any really important events from Australia, New Zealand, or Japan. I will mention we had some news from Japan, which was positive during the night. We had, machinery orders rose more than expected, but this is really not a top-tier figure. We had machinery orders rise 7.5 month over month and fall year over year less than expected, so it's slightly better than expected, but these are not key figures from Japan. What we do have in the next 24 hours and before the next show is fresh figures from the Eurozone. Regarding the question, Eric, what platform are you using? I'm using a TradingView. I find it comfortable for charts and good for putting these charts on my website on Forex Crunch. Okay, so that's why I'm using that. But maybe for trading you have other charts. So I'll just finish up what I said here before answering the next question. We have at 6:30 GMT French GDP for the third quarter. We're expecting, these are the events for today. We're expecting in France to see quarter over quarter a rise of 0.3% after flat last month. In general, growth in the Eurozone is very flat. Okay. Year over year, we're expecting 1.1, and we have just as the show begins. No, sorry, an hour before the show, we have German GDP quarter over quarter. We don't have yes, we do 0.3%, slightly weaker than in the previous quarter than Q2, but year over year 1.8, so it should be okay. And then during the show, or the end of the show, sorry, we have more figures from Italy and then for the whole Eurozone. So let's see, growth is expected to continue in the Eurozone, to be okay, to be sort of as expected. Nothing too exciting, nothing too weak. We'll talk about that tomorrow morning in more detail. Now I have a question about Eurodollar. So Eurodollar, bearish Eurodollar, stop loss 108.77. Let's take a look at Eurodollar. 108.77 is right, yeah, more or less here. Yeah. Again, it's somehow in the middle of the range, right? So this is the line you're talking about. It's in the middle of the previous trading range. It's in the middle of the pre-non-farm payrolls trading range. Above, I guess it's above this line here at 108.20. Maybe you're taking a margin from there. Anyway, the strong lines that I see here are maybe 108.25 and then 109. So maybe you're trying to defend 108.25 and taking a larger margin on 108.77, if I understand correctly. In any case, the lines I'm watching are very short term 107.80, 108.10 because it was a historic from July, and then 109. Okay. So another question: how do you see pound dollar and euro pound? So pound dollar, let's start with that. We mentioned that. I see it falling, but mostly because of dollar strength at the moment. The Bank of England was dovish, but went a bit too far with dovishness. The actual data is better. So I see it relatively stable. If the US raises rates, the Bank of England will be next, and sooner than people expect, because the situation in terms of wages, employment is better. Of course, inflation is lacking in the UK, but if we have stronger wages, then we have eventually higher inflation. 152.50 is resistance at the moment. 151.10 is support. Euro pound, we have that at 70.77. I see the pair, this cross falling. Support 70.20, further support 69.40. Yeah, I remember correctly, which was a level last seen in the summer, but yeah, so 69.40 was last seen in July. 70.20 was last seen in mid-September. These are the lines to the downside. I see, because of monetary policy divergence, ECB is set to loosen, even if they don't loosen too much, and the Bank of England expected to tighten. Anyway, 70.20 and 71.40 are the levels I'm watching. Another question from Alexei. Can you explain how big is the impact in the movement between euro dollar and Aussie dollar? I mean, pips approximately. Example, Eurozone move 1 pips down, and how the Aussie dollar. I don't see a one-to-one correlation between the move in the euro and the move in the Aussie. We can of course look at euro Aussie, and if we have a one-to-one move, if we have 1-to-2 move, then we would see the cross moving more or less in tandem, right? Euro Aussie. Let's take a look. So there is a correlation. That's why if we look at the cross, we're not seeing huge movements in the cross. But look, now the euro is falling, the Aussie is strong, and we're seeing the pair, this cross falling. So I wouldn't say there's a big impact. I mean, they're not really moving in tandem. Each one has its own good news and bad news, and they're moving more independently. That's why we're seeing relatively strong movements on the cross. Okay, so when we had when we had the NFP on Friday, let's try to find that 30-minute chart. Yeah, it was here. We saw quite choppy action. We saw the pair falling. Euro fell more than the Aussie initially, but then went up. All in all, it stayed in range. Okay, so when we have an event in the US, we have more or less the same reaction. But remember, Aussie has its own events like the excellent jobs report, and Euro has its own events. Both of them are moving down, but against the US dollar, but Euro is in a much worse position than the Aussie. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Both currencies have been affected by good NFPs, yeah. But both of them weakening against the US dollar, but now we're seeing Australian dollar strengthening a lot because of its own figures and strengthening also against the euro. Another question from Shebal. Do you think the pound will reach 150 this week? No. Short answer is no. Of course, I may be wrong, and we might have something really hawkish from Janet Yellen. So we didn't reach 150 on Friday. We reached 150.27, and since then we went all the way up to 152.50 because the situation in the UK is better than the Bank of England suggested. And again, if we had good NFP suggests that we'll have a rate hike in the US, and the rate hike in the US suggests a rate hike in the UK eventually. So we don't have important figures from the UK towards the rest of the week, and nothing today. Let's see if we have something tomorrow. No, not even. Yeah, we have the CBI leading economic index, the 3rd tier or 4th tier indicator. So A lot for pound dollar, a lot depends on the US. Of course, a very, very hawkish Yellen could push the dollar stronger, and the US dollar will, the pound dollar will slide. But I believe that if we have a very hawkish Yellen and excellent results from the US today, and jolts and jobless claims, then the US dollar will strengthen more against other currencies, less so against the British pound. So 150 is a bit far. Also, if you look at the recent movements, they haven't been that strong in markets in general. So if we don't have a top tier, anyway, that's the answer to your question. Any more questions? Maybe we'll cover another. Let's talk about more events. We don't have. Let's do sort of a. Yesterday we had implemented in the UK. It was okay, not as good as expected, but okay. We had Draghi talking again today. I'm with one eye on the screen, and he hasn't begun talking yet. I'm seeing this event from the Parliament. We had today employment data from Australia. It was excellent, despite the doubts. Draghi and Yellen talked today, and tomorrow we have quite a busy day. We have Eurozone GDP figures starting before the show from France and Germany, and then other countries. And then critical figures from the United States, retail sales, which is a huge portion of the US economy, and consumer sentiment. We see another questions. What pairs to watch today? So the pairs to watch today, I think, are well, first of all, euro dollar. Not only because it's the world's most popular pair, but we have both the heads of central banks talking. Okay, we have Janet Yellen and Mario Draghi. So Mario Draghi is expected to begin talking any minute now, and then he speaks again at 10:30 GMT, and then a few hours later we have Yellen. So this is really the pair to watch today, and we've seen it. And another reason to watch it is we've seen it trading in range. Okay, now we've seen this morning the US dollar strengthening, but look, so during the show it fell 20 pips. All in all, it's a very narrow range. I believe that today we might see it explode. Okay, my tendency is to the downside because of monetary policy divergence, because Draghi might sort of push away the doubts that we had from other ECB members. Okay, so we had ECB members such as Benoit Coureur, Hansen, and others talking about no need to rush, no decision has been taken yet. Draghi might say, yeah, we intend to move and raise that. And Yellen might repeat what her colleagues said regarding a good chance for a rate hike. It's not certain. They might go totally in the opposite directions and send euro-dollar higher. Anyway, it's going to be an interesting day. I think that when we have these top chiefs talking and the movement in the pair is sort of quite flat, relatively flat. And well, as I speak, it's falling. But anyway, so I believe we could see it move quite strongly. Okay. Another pair to watch is the Aussie. Let's see if it holds on to its gains. I believe against most currencies it can do that. And the pair to watch is the Canadian dollar, because yesterday was holiday in Canada, and now traders are back, holiday in the US and Canada. And more important reason is that we have few figures from Canada, and most importantly, the release of crude oil inventories in the US, which impacts oil prices that are close to support line. And if we have another rise, perhaps the Canadian dollar will move as well. So I hope that answers the question. Another question, what do you think about Kiwi? Let's take a look at the chart of the New Zealand dollar against the US dollar. So we have New Zealand dollar is relatively stable while other currencies are falling against the US dollar, 65.45. I had this line as, yeah, it's a bit old now. Yeah, 65.70 is some kind of resistance, somewhat weak. 66.15 is more important, and then 67. Support at 65, and then 64.80, which is quite close. The New Zealand dollar got a big blow from employment figures in New Zealand last week. So I'm not sure it has room for rises. Next week we have milk prices. I don't have a clear tendency about the New Zealand dollar. I was a bit more bullish, and now I'm more neutral, I would say. So that's where I am. These are the lines to watch. If you have more specific question, I'll try to answer that. Fabian asks, is there a source on the web where we can learn about who's who in the Fed and other central banks and their dovish or hawkish attitude? Well, first of all, of course, we cover the news, Forex Front, Fixed Street, and about dovish or hawkish attitude. But I think one of the big newspapers in the United States also had this sort of chart, this map, hawkish dovish. Let me try to find that. So that was, of course, there are changes in the voting patterns in the Fed and all kinds of things like that, but I'll try to find the hawkish dovish map for you. No, I can't find it right now, but anyway, maybe I'll do an article of my own listing all the people, and you'll have it available. It's a good question. I remember all the members, and I know who's hawkish and who's dovish. So I know that Evans and Kocho Lakota are on the dovish side. Rosengren as well. John Williams is dovish center. Stanley Fisher is center hawkish. Yellen is in the middle. Dudley is a center. So these are sort of members. I watch Lockhart and Lacker are both hawkish. They both begin with an L, their names. Okay. So I remember quite a few names. Brainard is dovish, but of course it's better to have it mapped out, right? So I'll try to organize the list for you. Anyway, we have next year a new member of the Fed. His name is Neil Kashkari. Used to be a politician, and he'll replace Kocho Lakota at the Minnesota Fed. Kocho Lakota was extremely dovish, and let's see if Kashkari will be somewhat less dovish, perhaps also a dove. I'm not sure yet. Okay, so I guess it's time to wrap up the show. Let's begin from the beginning. This is the wrap up for Thursday, November 12th. We have a busy day today ahead of us. In recent developments, we had UK wages missed just a bit, but they're still okay at 3% year over year, better than the US. So the pound remains relatively strong. Unemployment rate in the UK fell to 5.3. Draghi said nothing yesterday in his appearance, but today has another appearance just now, and then he'll speak once again. So that's a big event for all of you. Australian jobs figure came out much better than expected, and this pushed the Aussie dollar much higher above resistance, and I believe we'll be able to hold on to these gains for at least a bit. Okay, so this is the big boost higher. Basically, Aussie dollar erased the NFP losses. Okay, what we have today on the agenda: Mario Draghi speaking as we speak right here. Try to see if we can get some headlines in just before we end the show. That's a big event. He'll be speaking again later on. Then we have U.S. jobless claims at 1:30 GMT. Janet Yellen speaks at 2:30. That's the big event for the day. Let's see if she repeats what her colleague said about being hawkish about a strong case for a hike in December 2015 that could be dollar positive. Data from the UK, from the US, jobless claims, JOLTS, another Fed-related figure. Evans, a dove, speaks at 3:15. Crude oil inventories at 4, important for CAD, as oil is on close to support. Okay, and then we have more Fed speak later on. We have number 3 at the Fed, Bill Dudley at 5:15, and Stanley Fisher late in the night. Tomorrow morning we have GDP figures from France and Germany before the show, and other figures, GDP figures after the show. All in all, we had yesterday relatively quiet day because of a holiday in the United States and in Canada and other countries as well. And today we're back to business and with a very, very full agenda. So we're expecting action. And I owe you something about Mario Draghi. First, as you can look at your own euro-dollar charts, Draghi is dovish, okay? So we have euro-dollar falling at 107 to 107 because the Draghi is dovish. Let's quote some news that we have here. Draghi says that they'll re-examine monetary policy accommodation at the December meeting, repeating his dovish stance from the press conference, contrasting some of his colleagues, which said that there's no need to act, perhaps, and no decision has been taken. So perhaps no decision has been taken, but they're ready to act. Yeah, euro-dollar is falling. What else does he say? Signs of sustained turnaround in core inflation have somewhat weakened, mainly due to lower oil price and delayed reaction to a stronger euro. So if you could say in the past that inflation is low because of oil prices, but core inflation at least is picking up from 0.6, 0.7 up to 1%. Now he says that core inflation is weakening as well. So that's another very dovish thing. 106.92 is the level on euro-dollar. Let's try to read out a few more headlines. Closely monitor risks to price action. Something a bit more hawkish. Economic activity in the Eurozone has shown some degree of resilience to external factors, but that's probably the only hawkish thing. The rest are dovish. If price stability to risk, ECB would use all tools available within mandate, which is, of course, we're ready to act. Incoming data confirm that the Eurozone recovery is progressing moderately. Downside economic risks are clearly visible. That's, of course, dovish. That's negative. Downside risks are negative. More work needed on economic. Okay, so basically, Draghi says two things. First of all, we're ready to act, and they'll re-examine it, sort of shoving away the doubts. And a second important comment is that it talks about core inflation, that it has been improving, but not so fast. So we're seeing euro-dollar. I wouldn't call it a break. We need a confirmation, but basically we're in lower range. We fell under 107.05. That was the low yesterday. We're down to 106.92, and 106.91 is the low so far today. Support at 106.60. Okay, so we have some action during the show, which is of course great. And I picked up the main headlines for you after the wrap. And we have a few more minutes, perhaps. So we'll try to answer a few more questions. Why is EuroCAD going down while the oil is very low? Euro is weak, but oil is very low, right? So EuroCAD is falling only because of the euro, because of Mario Draghi. Oil is stable now. Oil is waiting for more news. So it's only. Well, let's try to look EuroCAD for you. It's clearly euro related. So if we had okay, so you can see this fall. This is the 30-minute chart, just under 142. It fell all the way from 140 to 60. Euro related, not oil related, not CAD related. Further support I see right here at 141.60. Okay, and resistance. Let's make it more correct here. 143.73, but initial resistance here. The next line of support is the round level of 140. 142.74, 77 weak resistance, supported 141.60 and 140. Okay, only related to the euro. 50 pips since the start of the show. Yeah, it's good to have action during the show. My target 104.77. 104.77. Well, 104.60 is the 12-year low for euro dollar. So we're not that close. That's of course the big level. We're back to 107. All in all, we're seeing a fall. Draghi said his word, as I talked earlier in the show. It's nice to have a good call. Anyway, he went dovish. He went dovish in general, reiterating what he said, and he also provided a more specific comment. So that's good to see all of that happening. Let's see if Yellen can counter his words and go dovish as well, and then push the pair back up, or she'll be hawkish like a few of her colleagues and push the pair even lower, perhaps under 106.60. So 106.60, 107.05, where we're almost there now, and 107.80 are the levels to watch on euro dollar. We're seeing it in action. So far, just a bit breaking out of range. Hopefully, we'll have bigger movements ahead. Fabian, after a sudden move like this on the euro, will it continue falling or will it bounce back because of profit taking? I'm not sure we'll break 106.60 before Yellen speaks. We could have profit taking, and more importantly, we could have tension. We could have wait and see mode for euro dollar until Yellen speaks out. So if Yellen gives us another hint of a hike in December, then we could have the bigger break, and then if not, we could see a big bounce back higher. So Draghi said his word, because Yellen is speaking in only 6 hours. I think we might have we do have a move, but it's perhaps not as strong as it would have been had Yellen not been scheduled to speak today. So I hope this answers your question. Anyway, we're already out of time. I wish everybody, thank you everybody for all the questions. I'm glad we also had action. Tomorrow I'll be here at the same time, 8 GMT, talking about Yellen, Draghi, Eurozone GDP, and the next events for tomorrow, retail sales. And hopefully we'll have more action like today and less boring stuff like yesterday when markets were a bit slower. So thanks everybody for coming. I wish everybody success and see you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.